my belief, and I want to state this before I go into a sort of bigger picture because it's important to know where I'm coming from. My belief is this: the aim of life is joy, and the path to joy is to become the person God made you to be. Not the person you want to be, but the person God made you to be. And the way to do that is through the exercise of virtue, and virtue can only be chosen, not enforced. Joy, to be the person that God made you to be through virtue, but virtue has to be chosen. And that's why, when it comes to politics, ordered liberty is the purpose of politics, and the preservation of ordered liberty is the role of government. And that's my political philosophy in a nutshell, right there. So that's why I think the biggest story of this year, and one of the biggest stories of my life, is the Twitter files. And I know the press is not covering it, but that's part of the story and part of why it's such a big story. It's a big story both for what it tells us, but also for what it implies, what it suggests. To bring you up to date, the latest tranche of Twitter letters show this remarkable symbiotic relationship between pre-Elon Musk Twitter, the FBI, the DOJ, all the cops, the federal cops, basically, and our corrupt news media, which is now shamed forever, not just for what they did during this period of time during the election, but by their corrupt and wicked refusal to report on what they did now, to report on this Twitter, on the Twitter files, which is a major part of the story, the non-reporting of it. Under the guise of policing election integrity, the FBI and other police agencies coerced censorship on Twitter, and even have lightly, followed sites that were making jokes, like my site, which I believe was suppressed. I'm sure it was suppressed because it's been climbing ever since Musk came on board. But most egregiously, they convinced Twitter's leftist head of security, Yoel Roth, that the Hunter Biden laptop story was fake, that it was misinformation. During the election, right, when it might have changed things, it really might have turned the tide, and it certainly would have turned some votes around. Now, this is important because we also know that the same government cops were meeting with Google, YouTube, and Facebook, and we know that they all got together and silenced a sitting president of the United States who won somewhere around half the electorate, right? He came in underneath Biden, but he won more votes than anyone had besides Biden up until that time. And we know that the press was quoting these people, sometimes anonymously, these spies, basically, but once in the form of this famous piece of spycraft where 51 top CIA people turned their skills against us, the American people. They turned their spying skills against us, the American people, to pretend that Hunter's laptop was Russian disinformation when they knew it wasn't, and the press complied. And all of this points to something else, to a collapse in support, a collapse on the left in their support of the First Amendment and free speech. There is no longer support for free speech on the left because they've lost the argument. They didn't like the Supreme Court when they lost the majority. They don't like the Electoral College when they lose the election, and they don't like free speech when they lose the argument. They just don't want to lose, and they don't care what they have to destroy to win. Vice President Kamala Harris, whatever her name is, Kamala Harris, is openly saying that that free speech should be subject to government whim. This is cut 3.
So what I would say about any social media site is this. I fully expect and would require that leaders in that sector cooperate and work with us who are concerned about national security, concerned about upholding and protecting our democracy, to do everything in their power to ensure that there is not a manipulation that is allowed or overlooked that is done with the intention of upending the security of our democracy and our nation.
So we know that our democracy to Democrats means they win. The threat to democracy in this last midterms, and this is from everybody on the left, the threat to democracy was Democrats losing democratically. That was the threat. Suddenly the threat to democracy, when they didn't lose as badly as they thought they would, suddenly the threat to democracy was over. Suddenly the New York Times stopped reporting it. The panic was past. The threat to democracy is them losing. And so we know when Kamala Harris says that, she wants to compel social media to not threaten democracy. We know that she means just what was happening before Elon came in. We know this because they're attacking Elon Musk for letting people speak until they censor somebody on the left, until he knocks leftist journalists off. Then, oh my gosh, what happened to free speech? The thing is, the press, our press, our media, our news media, is against the First Amendment that keeps them free. They are against free speech. Christine Rosen here, writing at Commentary, says the Washington Post has created a new position exclusively reporting on health disinformation, which includes the forces promoting scientific and medical disinformation on subjects such as vaccine, drugs, nutritional supplements, and healthcare treatments. Which would mean censoring the CDC, which was pouring out all kinds of disinformation and misinformation. National Public Radio hosts an entire disinformation team whose mission is, from the lies about the 2020 election to the growing influence of anti-vaccine activists, to the enduring influence of climate change denialism, lies and conspiracy theories have seeped into nearly all aspects of modern day life. I'm sorry, but all of those things have the mark of truth on them. We're not against climate change. The climate is always changing, and maybe human beings contribute to that. They probably do. But that it is an existential threat is, I think, a lie, but certainly provably not as bad as everybody says it is, because even their own reports, when you stop reading the stuff that they release to the press and start reading the actual reports, doesn't say that. So the media has become the Nixon. They've become Watergate. They are the cover-up. They're in league with government, with big business, with big Hollywood and big academia, or as they call themselves, the resistance, because they're resisting the freedom of the ordinary man, which is what I am in favor of. And the reason this is such a big story is because of the bigger story, which is the story of our time. We are in a tremendously dramatic moment and a tremendously dangerous moment. This story of our time has three basic components that are all of them linked. The first one is what I've been calling the information crisis. This is the rise of the internet, which, like the invention of the printing press, dislocated the control of information, took the control of information away from the elites, made it and democratized it, basically. And remember when this happened with the printing press that led to the Reformation. Ben Shapiro was always teasing me about the fact that I bring up the Peace of Westphalia all the time. But there's a correlation. The Catholic Church wanted control of Christian orthodoxy. That's basically, they feel they are the church, and they felt then they had been the church for 1,000 years, for 1,500 years. And Protestants wanted to break that control, and individuals wanted to break that control. And that the conflicts that sometimes started as religious conflicts became political conflicts, like the 30 Years' War. And the reason we cite the Peace of Westphalia, which was a series of treaties, I think it was 2 treaties, that ended the 30 Years' Wars, because that was the beginning of religious tolerance and diversity and the modern world. So that's what's happening now. An elite class is seeking to keep control over information because this new technology, the internet, has taken that control away from them, and they're willing to destroy the First Amendment and American freedom to do it because they want to keep their power. And their corruption and their dishonesty have destroyed our trust in the news media. The news media is now no longer trusted. I think a Pew poll had 34% have a great deal of fair amount of confidence in the media. 1/3 of people have a fair amount. And for the first time, more people, 38%, have no trust at all in the media. And the only reason 34%, the only reason the number of trust is that high is because 70% of Democrats trust them, which tells you everything you need to know about the media. It is a Democrat plant. It is the plant of big government, which is the plant of big business, which is the friend of academia, which is the friend of so-called socialism, which is really now at this point the mirror image of fascism. I don't know the difference. So that's one thing. The rise of the internet, the information crisis, and the fight for control of media, which is a fight between the people, the individual people, and the power, the entrenched power. Number 2 is the failure of that entrenched power. The elite class has failed. The people in charge, the media elites, the intellectual elites, the scientific elites, the deep state, the government elites, the resistance. Again, they've revealed themselves to be authoritarian, anti-American, corrupt, and utterly incompetent. The COVID lockdowns, which accomplish nothing but evil, right? Everything they say is due to the pandemic, except for the deaths by COVID. Everything they say has to do with the pandemic is actually their incompetence, is actually their mistake in panicking and shutting things down and doing things that had no effect on the spread of COVID, but just made children miserable, just threw our economy out of whack, threw our families out of whack, our businesses, everything, and shifted money from the middle class to the rich. It was just a disaster. It was one of the hugest mistakes in American history, certainly. And this wasn't a one-time deal, this kind of ministry of fear, as Eric Ambler might have called it, this ministry of fear that they set up to make everybody afraid and make everybody compliant. This has been going on for quite some time. George Carlin, the comedian and activist, loudmouth comedian, he was talking about this back in 2002. Here he is 20 years ago. This is George Carlin, cut one.
Germs. Where did this sudden fear of germs come from in this country? Have you noticed this? The media constantly running stories about all the latest infections, salmonella, E. coli, hantavirus, bird flu, and Americans they panic easily, so now everybody's running around scrubbing this and spraying that and overcooking their food and repeatedly washing their hands, trying to avoid all contact with germs. It's ridiculous, and it goes to ridiculous lengths. Besides, what do you think you have an immune system for? It's for killing germs. But it needs practice. It needs germs to practice on. So listen. If you kill all the germs around you and live a completely sterile life, then when germs do come along, you're not going to be prepared. And never mind ordinary germs. What are you going to do when some super virus comes along that turns your vital organs into liquid shit?
All right. So this fear has been spreading a long time. This deep state, the left, basically uses fear of the climate, fear of sunshine, fear of germs, fear of violence, fear of the end of democracy. Fear. It's always a crisis, and it's always an emergency, and so they need emergency powers to handle it, and you never get those powers back. Never, ever, ever. So the lies about the vaccines, which have completed the destruction of our trust in science. We used to love science and trust science. Now they've used that as a political tool. It has become untrustworthy, and that just climate alarmism is part of that. That's also destroyed our trust. The fact that so many loopy right-wing conspiracy theories have turned out to be true, not all of them, but some of them. So many big news stories, Russian collusion, impeachment charges, vaccine efficacy, climate change, they also are turning out to be false. This new omnibus spending bill, I want to just take in the whole year, but it's just an absolute mess. It is a brand of failure. It is a brand of failure that these guys cannot pass individual bills that let us know what is in them. This is the biggest change I would like to see in our government, basically, is that no bill can be more than 10 typed double-spaced pages with 18, print inch type, so I can see what they're passing, and they have to pass each one after debate. This omnibus stuff is garbage. No one is free when they are passing 4,000-page budgets. No one is free if you can't read, and if our lawmakers can't read the laws they're passing. So that's number two, the failure of the governing class and their loss of our consent and our trust. Remember, the government gains its legitimacy through our consent. They have lost that consent, and they've lost our trust. And finally, number three, and all these things, as I said, are intimately connected, the changing of the guard. The baby boom generation is dying, and I would thank God for it if I weren't a member of it. The post-war and the post-Cold War structures are crumbling. The electorate is shifting, certainly on the right, but we don't know how. Now, the scary thing is, and historically, at moments of big change like this, generational change, but also just cultural change, where we're going to have to move, we're moving into a global world. That doesn't mean I'm in favor of globalism. I think we should be a global world full of nation states, but still, I can pick up a phone right now and call Afghanistan and find out why they're not educating their women since Joe Biden deserted them all. I could do that right now. So we're living in a global world. The scary thing is, and I'm a fairly optimistic person, but this is a genuinely scary thing, that historically, in moments like this of big transition, there's a huge war that sorts things out. We'll talk about Ukraine in a moment. Nothing is, but I was just reading in the wonderful new J. Edgar Hoover biography about in 1905, there was another crisis about gender, another crisis about men, another thing about why aren't men men, and why is there a gynocracy, and why are women taking over, and all this stuff. And we know that this was another big change. Transition point was 1914 to 1945, the latest 30 Years' War, and that was a big change. And so, this is a moment of danger. When people want to hold on to power, when they've failed, when they're going to shift, it's a moment of danger because wars frequently clear out the old generation. But nothing's written. Nothing has to happen. And that is why I think we, the good guys, have to play a cool hand. The old elites are going to pass away. The past is going to pass away. That's a biological fact, like your gender. Old people die, and when the generations shift, new things come about. But whether something better or worse comes up is up to us. And a lot of you get angry at me, and I'm getting a lot of letters. You get angry at me because I won't play to passion. I won't declare that, I know the election was stolen and the CIA killed Kennedy, which is, by the way, nonsense. But all of these things that are passions of the moment, and you're absolutely sure of them. And I don't play to those passions. I think that the anger that feels like strength actually weakens you. When I say anger is the devil's cocaine, the devil always works by telling you he's going to make you more powerful. This bigotry is going to make you more powerful. This drug is going to make you more powerful. Having sex with everybody you meet is going to make you an alpha male. And you always wind up weak and depleted. And that's the way the devil works. And that's why anger is the devil's cocaine, because it makes you feel like you're a tough guy. It makes you feel like you're smart. Losing the Senate majority because Trump was angry about the election, this is an example of what I'm talking about. It's an excellent example. And I told you it was going to happen, and Trump was, no, I'm going to be reinstated. And when I was right, not one person said you were right and Trump was wrong. They just went right on to the next angry thing. Storming the Capitol on January 6th, no matter what you think it was, whether you think it was a kerfuffle or a riot or an insurrection, no matter what it was a loss for the people who did it. It was a loss for the good guys. It was a loss for the right because it gave the left something to hammer us with, and an unnecessary thing. When it comes to politics, I am a very icy person. I am a very icy dude when it comes to politics. The only thing I'm passionate about politically is American liberty, ordered liberty, through limiting the spheres in which the government is allowed to act and through the right actions of individuals and the security of the family. I have no political heroes. I don't have any political loyalties. I don't really even have a political party, although right now, of course, I wouldn't vote for a Democrat if he had wings and a halo. I will always vote for and support the person or the party I think will move the football toward the liberty goal on the next play. That is how I work, because you can't predict way into the future. All these people who tell you what's going to happen in 2 years do not know. I just get the guy who I think is going to give us the most liberty next time out for the next term or whatever it is. I voted for Trump when I thought he was the best person, but Trump does not mean diddly squat to me. As a person, he doesn't mean a thing to me. He's not Hitler. He's not Jesus. He means absolutely zero to me as a person. And other things, protest votes and third parties that can't win, they mean nothing. People who give up and say, it's all over, what's the point, mean nothing. Big talk and loud voices means nothing. The private sins of individuals don't mean anything in politics. They don't mean anything to me. Your skin color, your sex life, your religion. When it comes to politics, if you are for ordered liberty, you are my brother and sister American. We're on the same side. That is it. To repeat what I said at the beginning of this rant, the path to joy is God's creation through virtue, which has to be freely chosen. Governments are instituted among men to ensure that freedom. I want them to do that job and not the job that governments have done throughout most of history. The people who call themselves progressives are pushing the oldest idea in the world, government control, top-down control. Pharaoh was a progressive. He taxed the people who took their grain, and when the famine came, he handed out the grain, and then the people who came for the grain became slaves. That's been around since Pharaoh. The idea of freedom that the founders of this country put forward is the only new political idea there is. So the key to winning the future for me is not taking back the culture. It's recreating a new culture, creating a new culture of our own, a real culture that envisions a realistic future with conservative values, with eternal values, values that can survive the changes that are going to come. And we can preach virtue while preserving liberty and free will. This is a moment between one era and the next. It really is. It's a very serious thing. And I know it may feel like the end of days, but it's probably just the end of these days. And the days to come are up for grabs, and these transitions take time. I'm probably not going to be around to see the end of this transition. I mean, that's how long they usually take. So I'm telling you to remember, stay cool, act smart, play the long game, put liberty first, and don't forget to win. For more Klavan-y goodness, like and subscribe, and please subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.